Okay, so today, uh, Freya is eating grass. Stop eating grass. Don't eat grass. No. Okay, today I'm going to be mapping out my garden bed. Yesterday I went to a garden class that was really, really informative. They talked about companion gardening, irrigation systems, placement, things like that. And it was a free class from my local plant store that just likes to give classes to the community to help build successful gardens. So I'm really glad that I went. I learned a lot. And today I'm going to be measuring out where I'm going to place my garden beds. I'm hoping to get about a 6x3 garden bed. I feel like that's a pretty good size, and I'm looking to get 2 of them. Another great tip is drawing the layout of your garden, where it's going to be placed, where the irrigation system is going to be set up, because I was going to honestly water by hand. I've done that before, but I kind of want to elevate it and be a little bit more hands off and just be able to interact with my garden without having to worry like about watering it. So I'm going to be setting up a drip irrigation system, and so I drew out the layout of my backyard, where my hose is, and how I'm going to get that set up. So yeah, and then I'm going to be ordering the items online. There's a really great website called, I think it's called Drip Depot. I'm pretty sure it's called Drip Depot. I'll put the link in the description down below. But they have really good drip irrigation systems that connect really well, better than Home Depot, because Home Depot, not all the pieces are like meant for each other. Even though they can be compatible, it can still be really hard to like get everything to connect successfully. So Drip Depot is going to be the best option for just getting the whole setup. And yeah, so I have a measuring tape. I have some rocks to place so I get an idea of where it's going to be until I get my garden beds. And then I have all the materials that I'll get into when I'm ready to actually start filling my garden bed. But right now it's more of just like the setup and getting that in place. So yeah. This was where I was originally going to be placing my 2 garden beds, but I decided to change the location just because I wanted to build an archway between the 2 garden beds, and so it wouldn't be possible with the tree in the way, and the tree's root systems might also disrupt with the root systems of the plants. So I just completely switched up the location. But I am still notating and writing out the measurements of the garden bed so I can get an idea of how big they're going to be. I ended up doing 2 4x8 garden beds. And of course, Freya has to show some love. She is just as excited for the garden beds as I am. And I'm using the rocks as markers just to get an idea of placement and how big they're going to be. Again, I ended up switching the location, but I still use the same system. Depending on what you're growing, February is going to be the best time to start growing your sprouts. I just followed the instructions on the back of the seed packet. I'm pre-wetting the soil just because seed starting soil oftentimes is hydrophobic, meaning that it repels water. And so I'm just pouring out water and then letting it sit and soak. And then I came back to actually start planting the seeds within them. I just used paper and pen to write out plant markers, but I would definitely recommend either using like popsicle sticks, or you can buy plant markers that are made for labeling. The issue with the paper is that it absorbed all the water, the ink started to bleed, and they also are more prone to growing mold. So definitely not the best, but in the future I will definitely be investing in some plant labels. And again, I just followed the instructions on the seed packet in regards to how deep to plant them, and then topped them off with some more soil, leveled it all out, and just patted it in. I then put the dome on, which is what is going to help retain the moisture, and I'm going to leave the little vents open for some oxygen and airflow. So what I'm doing at this point is just repotting my cucumber. They're getting pretty leggy and really long. So I'm thinking of just putting them in a deeper pot, so that way they can stick up a little bit and have more support. I also learned that in the future, I'm definitely not going to be using these cardboard kind of material to grow them in, just because they're more prone to getting mold on them. There's a method called what's it called? Soil blocking, which is essentially this machine that just compacts it into this little block, and you don't need plastic, you don't need like any container, like it itself is a container. And I'm definitely going to be utilizing that method instead. Less waste, pretty straightforward, you know. But for now, we're just going to use these little blocks or these little plastic cups. It's a really beautiful day outside. Spring is basically here, and so I'm quite excited about it. It's nice that I have this little project to do today because, I don't know, it's simple enough and I'm able to care for my plants and do something that I love. So it's a pretty equal transaction, I'd say. One thing that this whole gardening process has taught me though is it's almost like skincare, where what works for others might not work for you, and vice versa. Hi, look, it's a cucumber plant. But yeah, this whole gardening process has really taught me how what works for others might not work for you. It's a little frustrating sometimes, especially when you're first starting out, because you don't have like that intuitive feeling of like knowing what works because you're still just a beginner at it. But you learn as you go, you know? I feel like this would be really empowering to be more self-sustainable and knowing how to grow my own food. So I've been enjoying the process so far, even though there's a lot of mixed answers sometimes and mixed methods of doing things. But I'll get to that point where I'm pretty intuitive about what works for me. It's kind of nice too because I'm just introducing them to the sun for a little bit. They're definitely like very delicate at this stage. They don't even have their true leaves yet, which this is like their first leaves, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's like this is a good sign of growth, but when they get like their fourth pair of leaves, that's when it's actually starting to go from being a sprout to like an actual plant. So they're still pretty delicate at this stage, but it's kind of nice because it's like a slight introduction of like hardening them off to the outside temperatures and to the outside elements and things like that. And it being like, whoa, this is what wind is and this is what the sun is. Interesting. Okay. You know? So that's one thing I did learn at my seed starting class is the importance of hardening off, because that's where a lot of gardeners will fail. They'll put in all this hard work and like starting their seeds and growing them. And when it's time to grow them outside, they'll just plop them in the dirt and hope for the best, and then they'll die. And all that effort that they put in when they were growing their seeds just kind of went to waste. And that's why it's really important to know the process of hardening off and methods to harden off successfully. So I'm really glad that I've kind of learned the process of that. And hopefully my journey teaches you a lot as well. Once the sprouts have shown signs of growth, I then placed a fan in front of them. This is to promote strength within the stems to ensure that they can withstand the wind when they're outside. In April, I started to gather all the materials that I would use to start filling my garden beds. My lovely friend assisted me in gathering some sticks from their front yard, which is a really nice way to utilize communal opportunities. I also gathered what's known as elephant grass, which is kind of like bamboo, and that's going to be used for my trellis. I then went to another friend's house, and they were able to cut me some cattle wire to use for my trellis as well. By the time I was done, this is what my car looked like. This is where the placement is going to be for my garden beds. There's a bush in the corner that I'm going to cut down to create some more space around the garden bed. My neighbor ended up cutting down the bush that hangs over my fence, which is unfortunate because I did like the look of it, but that's okay. May is the time to actually start filling my garden beds, so I'm using a method known as lasagna gardening, which is essentially layering cardboard, any sticks or branches, then using any organic material. This can be grass clippings, leaves, newspaper. and then layering on compost and soil. I like to add a layer of mulch on top, and this is what's going to help retain the moisture. I created a sketch of my garden beds to know relatively where I'm planting everything, so that way I can use companion planting, which is growing specific plants together for mutual benefits. For example, tomatoes, basil, and marigolds are excellent companion plants because they thrive in similar warm, sunny conditions while providing natural pest control and nutrient exchange. And basil actually enhances the tomato flavor, which is really nice. I measured out how much space to have between the sprouts so that way they can have room to grow. Once I laid them all out, I then started to plant them. Tomatoes need a lot of calcium, so a couple ways to promote this would be using bone meal, which is going to release that nutrient a lot quicker. However, you can honestly even crack an egg into the hole that you're going to plant the tomato in with the shell and everything, and that's going to be more of a slow release of calcium as the shell and the egg start to break down. I then moved on to planting the rest of my sprouts. This is how my sprouts started, and this is how it's going. So today I am pruning my tomato plant. The purpose of pruning, it kind of just results in how you're wanting your produce to grow. For example, with basil, if you don't prune, it grows a bit longer. But if you do prune, which I'll show you what that means, but it's basically just like cutting off the very tops of them. And that redistributes the nutrients and energy that goes to the plant, and then it results in growing more bushier rather than more taller. And for tomatoes specifically, there's something called suckers, and it's essentially when you have the main stem and you also have a stem that's just a leaf, and between those two there will be a bit of growth that will essentially become your tomato vine, and that's where the tomatoes are going to grow off of. A lot of people like to cut off the suckers because then it results in their tomatoes being bigger. So if I were to cut the suckers, it would have results of bigger produce. But if I leave the suckers on, it results in having more produce. So it kind of just depends on like what you're aiming for. I'm going to be doing something a little different where instead of pruning the suckers off, I'm actually going to be cutting the leaf stem that grows underneath the sucker. So I'm kind of doing both, where I'm not necessarily like aiming for bigger produce, but I'm looking for more produce just because the suckers are essentially going to be like where the tomatoes are growing from. So I don't really want to cut those off. But again, it just depends. Like a lot of people do prune the suckers. You can't really go wrong. It's just like what you're wanting out of your produce, whether you want more or bigger. But yeah, in this case, I kind of want more. And so I'm gonna just be pruning off the leaves and going through other herbs in my garden and other produce and seeing what else I can prune. I'm really happy with the results of my garden, honestly. To see so much growth already is really exciting. And so I'm excited for this upcoming month to see what comes of my garden. And hopefully my tomatoes and cucumbers get vine and long enough to build and put on my trellis, so that way I have like an archway of just greenery. That's kind of the dream and the goal. So hopefully that works out. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I'm excited with everything that I've been learning so far. I feel like I'm off to a great start, and of course, I'm going to be doing this again next year and seeing what else I can grow. I also built my water irrigation system, and it's fully functioning, it fully works. The only issue with it is that the spout that's connected to my house is very old. And so, even though the water irrigation and everything that I built is working just fine, the connecting piece of the water to my system is basically deteriorated, so it's just not fully like functioning properly, so I have to replace that. So lately I've just kind of been watering by hand with the spray setting on my hose, and that hasn't really been an issue. I have amazing friends that were able to stop by every now and then while I was on vacation to water my garden. So I just want to thank them for that, because my plants have survived because they were able to stop by and care for them. So I'm really grateful for that. Anyway, I'm going to start pruning my tomato plants.